Welcome to Orchestrate All the Things. I'm George Anatiotis and we'll be connecting the dots together. Stories about technology, data, AI, and media and how they flow into each other, shaping our lives.
In an era of dried up funding and Data Lakehouse vendor supremacy, Redpanda is going against the grain. The company just secured a 100 million Series C funding round to execute on an unconventional strategy. Redpanda founder and CEO Alex Gallego explains how things work for the company.
I hope you will enjoy the podcast. If you like my work, you can follow Link Data Orchestration on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook.
Alex, founder and CEO of Redpanda. I am also the original engineer, hacker, author of the Redpanda project, so the code base where we built a company around it. And I've been doing streaming for about 14 years. Prior to building Redpanda, I sold a company to Akamai in 2016. That powers some large use cases there. I started this company in 2019. And so the company is 4 years, 1.1 quarters old, 1.5 quarters old. We really have been selling the product for the last 2 years and 1.5 quarters. Prior to that, we spent the first 2 years of the company, rethinking how the future should be. And so we built Redpanda with 3 core tenets. One was simplicity, and it's probably the most fundamental reason why developers love Redpanda. It is so easy to use. We really obsess over the developer experience. I almost lose sleep on it. It's kind of unhealthy relationship for me, but it's true. It's really why developers love Redpanda. And so that was the first one. The second one, pillar of the product, was performance. And so typically, we see use cases where we deliver. I know you cover Scylla as well, right? But where we see common practice to see 10x lower latencies, and those in some commercial use cases actually deliver 10x lower hardware footprint that I have personally seen from large use cases, right? So we took one use case, for example, from 400 computers down to 40. This is for a large public company in the US. So the first one was simplicity, second was performance. Probably performance is what people know us most for today, and simplicity. And then the last one is cost effectiveness. And that comes from having built a disaggregation of compute on a store. So we learned the best thing from Kafka, which was the API. And we learned the best thing from Pulsar, which was the disaggregation of compute on a store. And so our true storage is S3, or Google Cloud Bucket, or whatever, so-called object storage system. And that in turn delivers 6x, 4x cost reduction from people. In fact, we have an active campaign on the website where we say we'll take any Confluent bill and cut it by 50%, or I will give them money, which is, I feel really, really strongly about it. And so those were the 3 core tenets of why we originally started the technology, and we've been, super successful in that regard. We have companies like Activision, Akamai, Cisco, Lacework, I've Midjourney, which is a hugely popular AI company, Moody's, NCR, Optimizely, Texas Instruments, Vodafone, StoneX, which is a Fortune 100. The one of the 3rd largest sports leagues in the US, and so on. And so we've managed to port over the largest streaming workloads for the most demanding use cases over onto Redpanda. Let me pause here for a second because I've been talking for 4 minutes and make sure I don't lose you.
Yeah, I'm still here. And I was just thinking to myself, well, you're basically sort of summarizing what we talked about the previous time we connected, which was about a year and a half ago. Except for the new bits, like, okay, not everything of what you said was known back then, but I think the core tenets at least have stayed pretty much the same. And so just to provide some context, the occasion today is the fact that you're about to announce round C funding. And this is kind of similar to the last time we connected, actually. The only difference being that, well, back then it was your Series B, and now it's Series C. So it's a typical thing for me to ask myself about, and then actually ask the people I'm having the conversation with about. It's a kind of dually pronged, let's say, question. So why did you think that raising another round was needed for you, and what did you use to actually convince your investors that this is a good idea? And also to add to that fact, well, your round, your Series B was not that long ago, and it wasn't small either. If my memory serves me right, it was something like 50 million.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay, so you raised a pretty big round, and now you've actually raised an even bigger one. I think it's over 100 million this time, within a relatively short period of time. So why did you feel that like you needed to do that?
Great question. In numbers, in the last year alone, we quintupled the revenue. We doubled the size of the company, and we have not lost the deal to any competitor in the last 7 months. And so when investors look at profiles of companies in their portfolios and they say like, well, this company wins all the time and they're growing so fast, and the kind of logos that they have access to are the world's largest companies in the world, like we should put fire in I guess wood in the fire, whatever the American analogy is, to continue to expand that. And so for me, I know this was a very difficult round for a lot of companies, but we have always been oversubscribed. We continue to always have up rounds in the companies, and so it makes sense for us to have a large war chest, if you will, to grow our go-to-market, right? So now that we are a mature company, that we can tackle the most demanding workloads, right? We now have true enterprise features. Large companies are adopting us. We deliver TCO, but we still work with their complicated enterprise environments and so on. Now is the time to accelerate the growth. And so this wasn't, anything other than like, we just want to continue to accelerate the growth. We have a great opportunity ahead of us from a company and an investment perspective. And when you look at those numbers, it's obvious, right? And it's why the round is so large, and it continues to be an up round. And the numbers speak now from a technology perspective, which is the second question. So that's like why people invest in us. Like it just kind of makes sense. From a technology perspective, it gives me the opportunity to continue to deliver what I think is the future of streaming data. And I think the future, so today, I feel that Redpanda is the best present of streaming data with the features that we have today. I mentioned Kafka compatibility, disaggregation of compute and store. The future for us is different from how everyone else sees the future of streaming data, different from Snow, different from Databricks, different from Confluent. And it's based on really three pillars. And so the first one is we were the first streaming storage engine back in 2020 to enable WebAssembly. It was really mostly of a prototype idea of like, right? So we really want to invest heavily in WebAssembly from a company strategic direction perspective. The reason for that is that when you look at, whether it's Gen AI models or anything all the data ML workloads, the bulk of the engineer's time is spent cleaning up the data. And so WebAssembly allows us to just clean it at the storage engine rather than ping-ponging your data back and forth between multiple systems. That's first. The second one, and perhaps most fundamental, and like different philosophically, etc., is to change our true storage engine in cold storage to be Apache Iceberg. And so that's a huge market differentiator. It's very different philosophically. Let me explain why. Today, if you're a company and you send your data to Snowflake, the way to query back your data is to use the Snowflake, right? In a way, you sort of walled garden your data, and it's how they make money, right? So it's a great business model that's by revenue numbers, right? But to the engineers, it just doesn't make any sense. Like, you should own the data. Like intuitively to us, it makes sense. Like if I generate my data, then I should own the data entirely. And so that's what Redpanda sort of inverts the relationship with data vendors, where, hey, instead of us owning your data in our format, which is what we do today, right? We're starting to work on the development of rebuilding the storage engine so that the format is an Apache Iceberg, so that you can plug in any downstream query engine. And so that's probably the most significant in technology investment for us. That's going to be expensive and it's going to take time, but we want to invest in that. I think that's where we see the future. And then the last one is serverless. It's to continue to invest in serverless so that we lower the barrier to entry for the young engineer, right? Someone who is not a late stage career engineer who's just starting, is facing a problem. We give them a super cost-effective solution to get started. So those are the three core pillars: WebAssembly, Apache Iceberg, and serverless. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's interesting. Actually, I've had the chance to go through your draft press release, and those technical items in terms of the direction you want to take the product sort of really stood out. So I was going to ask you to elaborate on those anyway. But now that you have, I'm starting to see something that goes a little bit beyond the technical aspect, those technical capabilities per se. I'm starting to see some elements, let's say, of your strategy as a company. So the WASM, when you talked about WASM and how it actually enables you to work closer to where the data is and avoid, just having to pass it around. That, to be perfectly honest, I've never actually used WASM myself, but this is what I've seen engineers who actually do use it praise it for. So in that respect, it sounds like, well, working on this support would actually enable you to try and not exactly go after, I wouldn't frame it in this context, but let's say eat up a little bit of the usage of solutions like Databricks. So if people are using streaming anyway, and in that case, specifically if people are using Redpanda anyway, by enabling them to use something like WASM for data transformation, you're basically telling them, well, maybe you don't need to pass at least all your data to something like Databricks. You can work on your data transformation already within Redpanda. Similar with Iceberg. So same idea, different external systems. So like, okay, so maybe you don't need to pass your data to Snowflake or whatever other, data warehouse or lakehouse or whatever. Maybe you can just keep storing it in Redpanda. And I know this is something that you've always sort of highlighted from the early days, precisely because you use S3 and all the other cloud storage formats. You're sort of encouraging people to use Redpanda as their primary data store, and by adding Iceberg support, you're making this, I guess, a bit easier and even more portable, let's say, across formats. So besides the actual, and yes, I mean, serverless, as you also pointed out, it sort of makes it easier to onboard people who are not necessarily proficient, let's say, with all the other technologies. So the combination of those three technical elements makes it seem like, plus the fact that you just got quite substantial funding, makes it pretty obvious where you want to go with that, basically.
Yeah, I think so. Thanks for recapping. That was excellently done, and you nailed it. You nailed that. The way I think about this though is if I make the engineer hands-on keyboard behind the terminal successful, if I make that person successful, will be a massive financial success. But to me, that's the hero of the story is the builder, the maker, the doer, who's actually putting products together and ideas into working systems. That's the person I've always been trying to make the hero. And we deliver things that made no sense for in some people's mind for the market, like the idea of BYOC, where we don't get to charge for reselling Amazon Compute. And I was like, that's okay. I want to charge for the value we deliver to people, right? And so same thing with Iceberg. They're like, hey, but you're not locking them in. I was like, that's what the engineer wants. Like, we have to lean towards making that person the hero of this story. And I think if we do that well, we'll be a massive financial success and an iconic company.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that already answers implicitly another question I had for you, which had to do with your go-to-market strategy, basically. So I remember from the previous time we spoke that you specifically framed Redpanda as something that you want streaming experts to use that want to do something more with the storage. So basically having like a bottom-up, let's say, go-to-market strategy aiming for technical people and then I guess technical decision makers rather than, I don't know, C-suite or middle management or whatever. And it sounds like that hasn't really changed. So
I think it
you
changed
can
a little bit though. For
okay.
us, is really focus on awareness. So our adoption does come from the bottoms up, but people don't pay us money for them, right? So our
Yeah,
sales process still tops down.
that precisely was going to be my question. So, and how did you basically convince your investors that, well, we're just going to go bottom up and this is going to work out great? Because I think they usually expect at least to see those two, like bottom up and top down strategies playing out in parallel.
Yeah. So we made a pivot last year to do that, where we have two parallels. And so the product and marketing engine is around awareness, right? We make ultimately what I said before is true. If we make this person successful, the builder, then we'll be financial success. How we capture that financial success is that we focus on awareness and enablement. It's like, hey, let me help you build your applications. This is some example. This is some templates. Let me help you walk through with classes, with webinars, with a bunch of enablement for the engineer. And we pair that with a top-down strategy. And why does it work for us? Is we deliver an insane TCO. Like, it's often 4x cost of alternatives for one of the largest Indian social media company. We saved them 10 million bucks. For one of the largest analytics company in the US, we saved them $3.5 million. This is like savings after licensing and cost and hardware spend, right? And so we save so much money that it's fiscally responsible for the CIO not to choose Redpanda. And so that's kind of how we pair it, right? We pair it with awareness, but we have really two buyers: the practitioner and then the executive sponsor. And so my sales organization focuses on the executive sponsorship, and my marketing and my product largely focuses on like awareness and enablement of the engineers being successful with the product. And that's worked out fantastic. Just in numbers, like I mentioned early on, is we just quintupled revenue last year and we doubled the size of the company. So that seems to work out great in this economic environment where cost is top of mind for all of the CIOs.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say, this sort of framing is something I've seen with other vendors in your space as well. Not necessarily streaming strictly, but the data, the broader data space as well. So, if you have an offering that makes life easier on the ground, like less hassle, therefore less time to complete a project and less cost in infrastructure, that sort of translates in savings for the decision makers, and this sort of framing plays out well on both ends, let's say.
Exactly. It's like one of the solutions where we all win. The executive looks really smart because he saves a bunch of money, and the developer loves us. And we win because we help them too.
Oh, okay. So speaking about the broader streaming space, I was wondering if we could wrap up by just picking up your brain basically on what do you see going on today in that space. I mean, okay, besides the obvious, like market analysis that shows that the space is growing, what do you see like in terms of technical development? Where do you see this space going? And as a specific question to address, I'd like to ask you about, well, if you see people applying like graph analytics in real-time data. A long time ago, I spoke to some people from Spark, and they have like GraphX and graph frames. And at the time, it was like 6 or 7 years ago. They were kind of timid about it. They were like, yes, we have those, but not that many people are using. So I'm just wondering if you have something similar, and what do you see the response to that thing?
Great question. Let me think so I can give you a good answer.
Yeah, sure.
We see a massive tailwind from artificial intelligence push on streaming data, which is different from 3 years ago. And graph databases and other databases morphed a little bit into vector databases, right? So it's similar problems of lookup space. You're looking for numbers, so floating numbers, integers, sequences, and so on, as opposed to like people, right? Like social, not so much social networks in terms of graph, but really networks in terms of numbers and coefficients. And so I think similar technology techniques used in a slightly different context, in the context of artificial intelligence. And that tailwind has been a really strong force for us. And I think I continue to, so if I close my eyes and I look at next year, I think over the next 2 to 3 years, streaming, something that looks like streaming will be what I think is the ring zero, right? So the building block for future enterprise applications. Let me explain. Something that looks like Redpanda has to be the messaging layer that connects your web serving layer with your ML layers. And you need something that looks like that so you can add databases on top. One database could be vector search. One database could be, search, like the recent acquisition from Snowflake, and so on, right? Like you can add data storages on top, but you need something that is low cost, that is massively scalable, that has a huge ecosystem play, so that when you connect TensorFlow to something that looks like Redpanda, you can get value, in 5 minutes. And so that's kind of how I see the world. And I think a big push for that has been the pressure on systems to store more data and render the data faster in some capacity, right? Like those two pushes make Redpanda, gives us this huge tailwind. And since I'm focused on streaming, most of the people that I talk to is that. And so, obviously take it with a grain of salt. It's like my frame of glass is, is where I sit in the infrastructure stack. But yeah, it's really interesting that the kind of idea of model stacking, for example, plays really well with the streaming system, where like, you send your data to one stream, and then you this one model, and then the model produces back another stream, and then you can sit another model on top. And so it sort of gives people infinite flexibility of model stacking, of experimentation, of replay. And so it's a very convenient API for developers to build applications on top. And I continue to see that as a strong tailwind for us.
Mm-hmm. Interesting, yeah. And since you mentioned actually vector capabilities, I agree. This is also something that I see happening a lot these days. Many database vendors adding vector capabilities, not just graph databases, but databases all over the place do that. And I wonder, do you see that? Do you see people using that a lot? Do you see even people asking a vendor like Redpanda to do that? Or in that case, do you just say, well, we'll just stream the data for you, but then you just use your backend of choice for that?
Yeah, we have a lot. I think people look at Redpanda as, for technical advice, not just on how to build their streaming architecture, but how to build their applications. And the reason is we're such a, tier 0, like critical infrastructure for people that they're like, what databases do you recommend we use for this other critical? And so, they ask us, and we're not going to build like we have our hands busy trying to advance our technology as we are today. But we just tend to recommend, depending on the use case, depending on whatever technologies they have. And so we partner extremely well with people. We basically, everyone that we've partnered with, we'd help them make money. Really, we bring a lot of people on. And so we have an super large and thriving partner ecosystem. I mean, I would say, tens and tens of partners. I need to come up with the right number. But yeah, we just partner really well with people. And so I would rather focus I think it's a superpower for a company, and I don't want to distract myself and the company from our true mission. And so we just partner well when we recommend other databases for people. But people ask us all the time. We're just not, I think it would be too distracting for me to go and build that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And to be honest, I hadn't checked your partner ecosystem previously, and just listening to you elaborate on how you deal with the situation, I was just thinking to myself, well, it sounds like you have a lot of power, actually, the way you describe it. So again, it sounds like it would be a good idea for other vendors to partner with you in that sense. If you can give a recommendation, well, if I'm a vendor and I know that you have this kind of power, I would definitely like to partner with you.
Yeah, I mean, you nailed it. The number, we probably get 3 major vendor partners. I'm like talking about like if you like discard some of the early stage companies, like probably 3 or 4 a week, just trying to set up advanced conversation. And we feel really lucky to be in that position, and people trust us. Like the thing is trust is earned, and people trust us because we give them true value, and they're like, wait, like help me, like how do you see the world? And so just like this conversation, it tends to be very natural. And so we our aim is to continue to make that person the hero. I was like, we just want to help you be successful, because we know if we make them successful, and Redpanda is part of that, it doesn't have to be all of it. It just has to be part of that. Then we'll be a massive financial success. And that's how I sort of see our relationship. It's like, I just want to help them. And we capture some financial value out of that. We don't have to capture all of it, but we capture some.
Yeah. And well, again, it sounds like at least a good part of your new hires probably goes to partner management, since you have all those partners.
Yeah, new hires. I mean, our go-to-market is scaling sellers, pre-sellers, customer success, post-sales. Like it's not enough to just sign someone. Like I think it's sort of the entire customer journey. For me, it is truly a long-term partnership. We're like tier 0 as it comes from some of the customers I mentioned. And so if we go down, their business goes down. Lacework, for example, they posted a YouTube, they wrote a new stock article. We're happy to send you, but like just to give you a sense of like the kind of criticality for them. And so we really see ourselves as like a long-term partner. But so it's not just enough to like, hey, sign the contract, pay me money. It's like, let me help you through the life of this journey. Let me, involve you in the roadmap discussion. What do you think about how do we think about the roadmap? Is this something that, would be helpful to you? And so on. And so it's for me, it's almost easy to have like an influx of idea of what to build. The hard thing, as you may know, is like saying no. Like I say no mostly. I know we're 2 minutes over. I have to jump to my next call, but I just wanted to make sure that I answer all of your questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. And yeah, thank you very much for your time. I know you have a lot to do, especially today. So good luck with everything. And well, let's see what happens in the next 18 months. I'm curious as to whether there will be like a round D, I guess, of, well, if that keeps up, your round D will probably be over 200 million. But well, let's wait and see what happens.
Yeah, if all things continue to work. George, great chatting with you. Great to catch up again.
Thanks for sticking around. For more stories like this, check the link in bio and follow Link Data Orchestration.